The story starts in New York in 1955. At that time, two kids, Winston and his older brother Frankie, are running from the police, but they get caught and put in jail. Winston, the younger brother, is really scared and confused, but Frankie tries to calm him down, saying everything will be okay. Frankie also tells Winston to stay quiet and not tell anyone anything, especially since Frankie believes there's someone else who's really to blame. Years later, Frankie is now grown up and works for a tough boss named Cormick. One day, Frankie sneaks out of Cormick's secret room and runs into Lawrence, who guards the place. Frankie quickly asks Lawrence not to tell on him, and he even hints that he knows a big secret about Lawrence that he could tell others. They decide to keep each other's secrets safe. That night, Frankie goes to a New Year's Eve party where people know him and greet him. The party happens at a hidden club owned by Cormick, who is a powerful gangster. Cormick proudly tells his friends that Frankie is like family to him and has become very skilled and trustworthy. After saying hi to everyone, Frankie heads home. Behind his calm appearance, Frankie has been planning something big. Frankie leaves the club and heads to the subway station, where someone named Ben is already waiting for him. Together, they walk down to the train tunnel, setting up some equipment, and then move up to the hallway above the tunnel. Frankie's plan is to break into Cormick's vault right at the stroke of midnight, when everyone is busy celebrating the new year. As the train rushes by, it hits an anchor Frankie and Ben set up, which makes the vault door swing open. Just then, fireworks burst in the sky, filling the night with noise. Frankie and Ben quickly enter Cormick's secret room filled with gold bars. But Frankie doesn't care about the gold cause he's after a special old machine that prints coins. Right in the middle of their plan, Ben betrays Frankie. Ben also wants the coin machine and points a gun at Frankie to take it for himself. Frankie warns him, but Ben won't listen, so Frankie stands his ground and shoots Ben. The loud gunshot causes panic, and Cormick's guard Lawrence rushes down with others to see what's happening. The room fills with smoke as Frankie slips out through a hidden exit while a wild gunfight breaks out. Soon after, Frankie makes his escape, using all his tricks to dodge the people chasing him. He climbs to the top of the building and jumps out a window, landing on a pile of trash he set up earlier to break his fall. But one of Cormick's guards figured out what Frankie was planning and shoots him. When the guard runs out of bullets, Frankie comes back into view. Suddenly, a car speeds up and knocks down the guard. The driver is Yin, Frankie's wife, and she tells him to jump in. They quickly drive away, dodging bullets as they make their escape. In London, Frankie's younger brother Winston, now an adult, is showing a business idea to a man named Mr. Davenport. Winston tells him that there's a big chance to make money that not many people know about. Since so many new buildings are going up, parking lots are becoming really valuable because all those cars need a place to park. Winston has already taken care of all the permits and approvals. But Davenport isn't sure if the idea will be profitable. Winston stays calm and hints that Davenport might miss out on a great opportunity, then gets ready to leave. While they talk, Davenport's wife, Rosalind, walks over, looking bored and curious. At that time, Rosalind doesn't think much of Winston's parking lot idea, saying it's too small for someone as rich as her husband to bother with. She even compares it to something big and famous, like singer David Bowie, who benefits from her husband's popular brand. Winston guesses that Rosalind might know Bowie's manager, Tony, who is also one of Winston's investors. So Winston calls Tony, who speaks directly to Rosalind and explains why Winston's idea is actually valuable. Rosalind feels a bit embarrassed, realizing Winston was right. Finally, Davenport agrees to that proposal and decides to invest. That night, someone knocks on Winston's hotel room door. It's Rosalind. Turns out, their relationship is more than just business, because they've been working together to trick Davenport. They happily celebrate their success. Rosalind, who is Davenport's young wife, has secretly planned for a long time to drain her husband's wealth. For her, teaming up with Winston, a charming man, to deceive her husband was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. Meanwhile, Winston is just using Rosalind, a rich but lonely woman. While Rosalind is in the bathroom, Winston senses something strange and starts to look around. Suddenly, 3 people burst into the room and attack Winston. Then, a maid joins in, helping to capture him, and he is then taken back to America against his will. These people were sent by Cormick, a powerful gang leader in New York City. Elsewhere, Cormick is furious with Lawrence and his 3 top guards. Cormick's disappointment reaches its peak, and he orders Lawrence to shoot the guards who failed to protect his valuable box. At that time, Lawrence can't bring himself to do it, which only makes Cormick angrier. The box that Frankie stole is not just an object, cause its loss has put Cormick's family in great danger. Cormick is actually the manager of the legendary Continental Hotel, which is built over his secret club. He gives his guards an ultimatum to leave the group and risk their family's safety or jump off the floor they're on. They stand silent, pale-faced, and frozen as they face this terrifying choice. Outside, Winston is taken out of the car and led into the hotel. A receptionist greets Winston with an apology for any trouble he may have experienced. Just then, the body of one of Cormick's men falls from an upper floor, making the atmosphere tense and eerie. Winston is quickly forced inside the hotel, moving through hallways and rooms until he reaches an elevator that takes him to the top floor. There, Winston is asked to sit, and it's clear that he and Cormick already know each other. Winston knows that Frankie had become successful here since Cormick first recruited him. At that time, Winston wants to find out what's going on. Soon after, Cormick reveals that he thinks Frankie has lost focus and started changing ever since he got a girlfriend. Now Frankie has stolen something extremely dangerous, and Cormick wants to know where he is. He threatens Winston, saying that if he doesn't cooperate, everyone in the hotel will hunt him down. Winston realizes he's just being used as bait to lure Frankie out. He explains that he and Frankie haven't been in touch for a long time and doubts Frankie would even care enough to help him. However, Cormick doesn't fully believe Winston's story and insists he find Frankie's location. Cormick repeats his threats, warning Winston about the dangers of crossing him. But Winston stays strong, saying he's willing to look for Frankie on his own. In the end, Cormick lets Winston go and allows him to leave. Cormick then orders his assistant, Sharon, to escort Winston down to the lobby, while telling his men to keep a close eye on Winston. Sharon takes Winston to the elevator, and Winston safely exits the building. This hotel, called the Continental, is a famous place that will one day become a hideout for legends like John Wick. In the busy, crime-filled city of New York, a detective named Silva is secretly in a relationship with her boss, Mayhew. This forbidden relationship has been going on for a while, even though Mayhew already has a wife. During a short conversation, Mayhew accidentally drops his wedding ring, but Silva doesn't seem to mind. They enjoy their relationship without worrying too much, although Mayhew secretly wishes for something more serious. At that moment, Silva decides to leave first, asking Mayhew to lock the door when he leaves her apartment. Elsewhere, a shady gun deal is taking place. A group is holding some gun sellers hostage to send a message. Yuzin, the leader of a Russian gang, wants to teach these sellers a lesson for messing up prices by selling weapons too cheaply. But the small group of 3 sellers doesn't seem worried, and instead, they start provoking Yuzin. Insulted, Yuzin approaches a woman in the group, named Lou, and mocks them for bringing a woman along to a gun deal. As Yuzin gets ready to shoot, the situation changes, and he finds himself under attack from the small group he was trying to intimidate. His men don't escape either, and all of them are quickly defeated. Afterward, the 3 people from the small group walk up to the injured Yuzin, mocking his now powerless state. Miles warns Yuzin not to let his boss mess with their group. Even though they're small, they'll fight back if anyone tries to push them around. Miles allows Yuzin to pass this message on to his boss. Shortly after, Yuzin quickly leaves, getting into his car and driving away. From a distance, someone is watching and taking photos of Yuzin fleeing. That person is Silva, a detective investigating the arms trade. Silva follows Yuzin all the way to the Continental Hotel. She then contacts Mayhew to report her progress, letting him know that her suspect has entered the Continental Hotel and that she plans to follow him. Hearing this, Mayhew is shocked. He warns Silva that the hotel is a dangerous place and tells her not to go any further. However, Silva ignores his warning and gets ready to cross the street toward the hotel. Fortunately, Mayhew arrives just in time and stops Silva before she goes inside. He quickly takes her to his car and drives to an alley where they can talk privately. In their conversation, Silva expresses her frustration at Mayhew for stopping her. Mayhew responds by questioning why she continued the chase all the way to the hotel. Frustrated, Silva explains that the arms dealer she's been tracking is inside that hotel. But Mayhew warns her again, explaining that the hotel is not a place anyone can just enter cause it's the most mysterious and dangerous spot in New York City. Mayhew tells Silva not to try going in, then leaves her standing there. Silva can only watch the hotel with a look of curiosity. In another part of town, Winston meets an old friend named Charlie. They have a good history together, as Charlie and his gang once helped Winston and his older brother. Charlie happily welcomes Winston and invites him inside. Hearing that Winston is now doing well in London, Charlie starts talking about the state of New York. According to him, the city has become a very dangerous place, with high crime rates, constant gang fights, and trash-filled streets. The city government is also going through tough times. They continue their conversation inside. Winston then reveals that he was kidnapped by Cormick in London. He's clearly frustrated, feeling that he's been dragged into trouble caused by Frankie, who stole something valuable from Cormick. Now, Winston has to find Frankie before Cormick does. Charlie gives Winston some information about a place called Dojo Burn Karate. He explains that in the past, Frankie was involved in gun smuggling with a friend who owns the dojo. After this, Winston decides to borrow a car. Charlie reluctantly lends him his Mustang, advising Winston to keep it covered with a tarp when he parks. Meanwhile, the three gun sellers who met Yuzin earlier arrive at another location. Lou asks her older brother, Miles, to quit the illegal business because it's too risky. There, Miles reassures her, promising to find new buyers, though Lou doubts the plan will work. Miles promises to leave the business after selling off all their stock of weapons. Soon after, Lou heads to the dojo, which is actually Dojo Burn Karate. When she arrives, she notices that the store's window is broken. Miles shows up and offers to help, but Lou refuses, and they start arguing again. Since their dad passed away, Lou feels that Miles has stopped caring about the dojo. But Miles thinks it's hard to keep the dojo running because it costs a lot and barely has any students. He wants to sell it, but Lou insists on keeping it. Frustrated, Miles leaves his sister there. Moments later, Winston arrives in front of the dojo and quickly covers Charlie's Mustang with a tarp. The dojo is in Chinatown, and several people from the Asian community notice Winston as he arrives. He enters the dojo and looks around. Not long after, Lou appears claiming to be the dojo's owner. She's cautious, even setting up a weapon by the door handle, suspicious of Winston's presence and questioning why he's there. At first, she thinks Winston might want to train at the dojo. Winston introduces himself and explains he's looking for his older brother, Frankie. Hearing that name, Lou becomes angry and tells Winston to leave, insisting they want nothing to do with Frankie or his family, as they're sure he only brings trouble. Suddenly, there's a loud noise from below the dojo. Winston quickly points his weapon at Lou, demanding she show him the way downstairs. In the middle of the dojo, there's a hidden door leading to an underground area. Down there, Lemmy and Miles immediately point their guns at Winston, while Lou swiftly grabs Winston's weapon. Lemmy and Miles demand to know who Winston really is, and he explains he's Frankie's younger brother. Hearing this, Lou and her friends start to believe him. When Winston says his brother's full name, Francis Patrick Scott, they're finally convinced he's telling the truth. Winston admits he hasn't seen Frankie in a long time. Although he feels out of place, Winston knows he has to find Frankie and needs the help of Miles and his group. Shortly after, Miles leads Winston into a room filled with weapons and equipment, ready to be used. There, they recount their history with Frankie. They had all served in the same battalion as soldiers, and after the war ended, they entered the gun smuggling business together. However, one day, Frankie vanished, leaving them wounded and without their weapons or money. They later learned that Frankie now works at the Continental Hotel, owned by Cormick. Knowing this place serves as a club for professional assassins, they believe Frankie has found his niche. Then, Lemmy shares that Frankie has been seen around Alphabet City. Before Winston leaves, Miles hands him a larger rifle, thinking he'll need it. After that, Winston packs the equipment into his car, while a few onlookers from the Chinese community keep an eye on him. One of them quickly sends a message through a young boy. Meanwhile, Ben, who was previously shot by Frankie in the vault, has survived but is now enduring heavy torture. Two assassins, sent by the High Table, a powerful criminal organization that owns the Continental Hotel, are with him. Ben, desperate and injured, claims that it was Frankie who took the box, trying to clear himself of any responsibility. And KD, one of the assassins, sees through Ben's denials, knowing he was involved in stealing something extremely dangerous. One of the other assassins considers going after Cormick, but KD signals to hold off, as her partner resumes Ben's punishment. At the same time, Silva approaches the Continental Hotel. She takes a moment to glance at the hotel guard, feeling a bit unsure, but the guard gestures for her to enter. Silva is surprised by the number of guests in the hotel. She orders a drink from the bartender and pays with regular dollar bills. The bartender looks confused since transactions inside the hotel are usually done with special coins. However, a nearby guest signals the bartender to accept her money anyway. As Silva observes the scene around her, she notices that everyone there, even the servers, is armed. When she tries to book a room, the receptionist tells her that all rooms are full and suggests another, more suitable hotel. The receptionist, who is also carrying a gun, makes Silva even more cautious. After noticing someone else pay the bartender with a special coin, Silva decides to leave the hotel. Sharon, the hotel manager, steps out and watches Silva as she exits. Meanwhile, Winston has arrived in Alphabet City and accidentally spots a movie poster that reminds him of his brother's whereabouts. He quickly turns his car around, drives to an old theater, parks, and covers the car with a tarp before heading inside. Suddenly, a projector lights up, showing someone sitting down, leading Winston to believe it's Frankie. But it's actually a trap. A woman sets up a snare, leaving Winston hanging. Just as she's about to finish him off, Frankie appears, stopping her and freeing Winston from the trap, revealing him as his younger brother. At that time, a woman named Yin is surprised to learn that Frankie has a younger brother and questions how he found this place. Frankie begins questioning Winston, who explains that Cormick is after him. Winston expresses frustration, blaming Frankie for dragging him into this situation, revealing that Cormick had kidnapped him in London. Winston says he doesn't care about Frankie's life, but is now caught up in the problem too. Despite this, Frankie refuses to leave, determined to stay and fight. Soon after, Winston continues trying to persuade Frankie, even offering to help him resolve his troubles. Still, Frankie and his wife refuse Winston's offer. Winston tries again, asking why Frankie is risking a fight against Cormick, who has a powerful criminal network far beyond just this city. Frankie then shows him the coin printing machine he stole from Cormick. A group called Nail had hired him to steal the machine, promising freedom and wealth, but they betrayed him, leading to Frankie being hunted. Frankie admits that those controlling Cormick are feared, with spies everywhere. Even though he realizes he's in deep trouble, Frankie feels he can't back down. Winston insists he can help, saying he has enough money now to get them anywhere. Outside, Cormick's men arrive in front of the theater, spotting Winston's car. They prepare a bazooka and begin their attack. Amid the tension, Yin, Frankie's wife from Vietnam, refuses to leave, insisting this place is her home. Despite Frankie's attempts to convince her, saying they have nothing left here, Yin remains stubborn. Meanwhile, Winston urges them to hurry. Cormick's men enter the building, searching every room, but find it empty. Cleverly, Winston had covered another car with a tarp to fool their pursuers. Fortunately, they managed to escape the theater, and Frankie finally convinces Yin to come along. She gets into the car, though clearly unhappy, while Winston drives off quickly. Yin keeps glaring at Winston, feeling like she's the reason they got caught. Winston jokes with Frankie, saying that Charlie sure knows how to pick a wife. Frankie asks why Winston didn't leave when Cormick let him go, and Winston, reluctantly admitting it, says that Frankie is still his brother, which the only family he has. When they arrive at Charlie's place, Charlie greets them happily, relieved that Winston managed to bring Frankie. Frankie tries to calm Yin down, realizing that Winston has saved them from the danger caused by his own mistakes. Yin, still stubborn, eventually steps away from Frankie to check the area, making sure no one has followed them. Meanwhile, Sharon reports to Cormick that Frankie and Winston have outsmarted their hunting team. Hearing this, Cormick orders Sharon to hire outside help, suggesting he look among guests who might be interested. Confident, Cormick instructs Sharon to call on a famous pair of assassins known as the twins, Hansel and Gretel. Sharon then heads to a room in the hotel to deliver Cormick's message to the deadly duo. Elsewhere, Silva is in the shower when she hears a noise outside her room. With a gun in hand, she steps out to check. On her table lies a file containing information on Frankie, showing that he was reported missing while in the military. Silva wonders who left these secret documents in her room. Meanwhile, at Charlie's hideout, where he once saved Winston and Frankie from the streets when they were teenagers, they remember how their lives went separate ways after that. Winston, who had a talent for business, inherited their father's ambition. Unfortunately, their father's failed business ruined the family, and his debt to Cormick led to the family's downfall. Winston believes Frankie made a mistake by working for Cormick. Although Frankie claimed to have a big plan, that plan didn't work out. Winston feels hurt that Frankie never reached out to him, even preventing him from visiting when he was in prison. When Frankie was released, Winston wasn't given a chance to meet him either. Frankie explains that he kept Winston away to protect him from the dangerous life he was living. Frankie, with complete sincerity, tells Winston that he only wanted him to have a safe, successful life, far from the risks he faced. Their conversation grows tense, with Frankie trying to make Winston understand that sometimes difficult choices are necessary to protect loved ones. Winston finally falls silent, absorbing his words. Back at the hideout, a traitor tips off Cormick, revealing that Winston and Frankie are hiding there. The traitor readies a gun, hoping for a big reward for his information. That night, Frankie and Winston are already in the car, waiting for Yin. Suddenly, Yin attacks one of Charlie's men who tries to shoot at them, shouting that he's betrayed them. Moments later, Cormick's men arrive and start chasing them. Winston speeds off, while Yin fires back from the car to defend them. On top of a building, one of Charlie's allies, hired by Winston, waits with a helicopter for their escape. As Winston speeds through a narrow alley, the car flips over, losing control. Cormick's men surround the car, firing continuously. Yin, Winston, and Frankie manage to reach the rooftop, trying to avoid their enemies by splitting up to distract them. However, Winston gets captured and is held at gunpoint by one of Cormick's men, who demands to know where Frankie and the coin-printing machine are. Just then, Frankie appears from behind, and together they manage to take down the attacker after a tough struggle. Winston feels both unfamiliar and moved, fighting side by side with his older brother again. Meanwhile, Yin is chased by one of Cormick's men into a nearby apartment building. Following her trail of blood to a room, the attacker ends up in a fierce fight with Yin, who manages to defeat him. The twin assassins begin making their way up the building, using the elevator. Finally, the three reach the rooftop, where the helicopter waits with only one of Charlie's men, but Charlie himself is nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, Yin is shot, revealing that the twin assassins are already there. Frankie and Winston quickly help Yin into the helicopter. In the chaos, the twins fire at the pilot, but their shots miss. The pilot manages to take off, even as the twins keep firing from below. There, Frankie tries to comfort Yin, assuring her she'll be okay. He also asks Winston to take care of Yin, his wife. In the confusion, Frankie explains that Cormick really only wants him and the coin-printing machine. With courage, Frankie jumps out, leaving Yin and Winston in deep sadness. Frankie faces the twins, holding the coin printer, but is soon shot, leaving Winston and Yin devastated. Winston is overwhelmed with grief, while Yin is crushed by the sudden loss of her husband. The box is then taken to the Continental Hotel. Cormick calls a locksmith to open the money-printing box, but inside, he only finds a monkey statue. Realizing Frankie tricked him, Cormick is furious. Meanwhile, Winston and Yin head to the Burton Karate Dojo, which Winston remembers as a place where they can find weapons for protection. In 1955, in the Bronx, young Frankie and Winston lived on the streets and worked for a man named Cormick. Frankie prepared a bottle filled with oil, lighting it on fire. Not fully understanding, Winston followed his older brother's lead. Their job was to burn down a store that belonged to one of Cormick's rivals. Hungry and desperate, the boys went through with it. Winston threw the burning bottle, which quickly set the store on fire. Suddenly, they heard someone inside shouting for help. Realizing people were inside, Winston felt regret and started crying. Frankie quickly grabbed Winston's hand, and they ran away. This memory stayed with Winston forever. In the present, Winston feels deep sadness over his brother's death. With Miles, he goes to collect Frankie's body from the morgue. Miles quietly tells the staff that Winston is Frankie's brother. The staff give them Frankie's personal belongings, which bring back many memories for Winston. Looking at Frankie's face one last time before the cremation, Winston cries, feeling the deep loss of his older brother for the first time. In 1973, in Saigon, Vietnam, Yin was married to a Vietnamese army commander. Since she couldn't have children, her husband forced her to place a bomb in a bar where American soldiers often went. He convinced her that doing this would prove her love and loyalty to him. Yin cried and begged him to let her go, but he insisted. To him, Yin was just a tool for his mission. When she asked why she had to do it, he said it was a sacrifice needed for their cause. Yin walked through the market to the bar, looking around before going inside, which was filled with American soldiers. She tried pressing the bomb's trigger several times, but nothing happened. That's when Yin met Frankie for the first time. They smiled at each other and felt a special connection right away. Now, in the present, Yin is recovering at the Burton Karate Dojo. Lu hears that someone left something outside the dojo and gets angry at two men responsible. She's so frustrated that she even roughs them up a bit. Suddenly, a man named Danley arrives, introducing himself as the new leader of the area, taking over from the old Chinatown boss, Chun. There, Danley demands that every shop in the area install a cigarette machine. However, Lu refuses, explaining that her father had a deal with Chun. But Danley says the old deal doesn't matter anymore. Lu warns him that anyone who tries to mess with her dojo is messing with her family. Danley, not afraid, tells Lu to focus on her own business. Meanwhile, Mayhew visits Silva's home, where she's angry because his arrival interrupts her investigation. It turns out Mayhew was the one who placed important documents at her location to help with her case. Still, Silva is determined to handle the case on her own. Mayhew apologizes, but Silva's phone suddenly rings, and she receives news from her office about Frankie's death. For Silva, Frankie was the main target of her investigation. At the Burton Karate Dojo, Winston, along with Miles, Lu, and Lemmy, gather to pay their respects in front of Frankie's ashes. Even though they had a rough past with Frankie, they still consider him a friend. Suddenly, Winston expresses his desire to take down Cormick and admits he needs their help. Miles mentions that it will be difficult since Cormick has changed and is now causing trouble for them. They realize that many strange and skilled people staying at the Continental Hotel will likely come after them. Then Winston suggests attacking while Cormick is frustrated over losing the coin-printing machine, but Miles believes Cormick will go after anyone connected to Frankie to get the machine back. Lu refuses to get involved, while Lemmy suggests that Winston should try to return Cormick's machine, so this whole situation can end. Unfortunately, Winston doesn't know where the machine is since Frankie hid it. Winston feels worried, thinking Cormick might go after them all before he finds the machine. Shortly after, Winston suggests that if they manage to take down Cormick, they could gain control of the entire hotel and everything in it, including the illegal arms trade. Miles and Lemmy find the idea tempting. Lemmy doubts Winston's ability to pull it off, but Winston insists he can. He explains that he knows Cormick well, understands his moves and way of thinking, and knows how Cormick manipulates everyone around him, including Winston and his brother. Winston is also sure that Cormick's money is enough to fund the army they need for revenge. Suddenly, Yin arrives and asks where Frankie's body is. Silence fills the room as she notices the urn with his ashes, and she gets angry. Yin steps toward Winston, trying to attack him, but Miles and Lu hold her back. Winston tries to calm her down, but Yin tells him he has no right to do any of this. Despite Winston's apology, Yin takes advantage of his injuries and manages to attack him before leaving. Finally, Miles and Lemmy agree to help Winston, realizing they will also need Yin to take on the Continental. Meanwhile, Silva arrives at the morgue, only to find that Frankie's body is missing. She asks a staff member, who then calls his colleague, but Ezra claims not to know anything and returns to his office. Silva confronts Ezra, sure he knows more than he's saying. Despite Ezra's denial, Silva intimidates him until he confesses. He reveals that someone claiming to be Frankie's brother paid him to cremate Frankie's body using a green car from Chinatown. After revealing the truth, Silva lets Ezra go. On the other hand, Cormick is enjoying his meal when two members of the high table, KD and Henchman, suddenly arrive to meet him. At that time, KD mocks Cormick for being too relaxed, even though the coin printing box was stolen, causing a big problem for the high table. Soon after, KD removes her mask, making Cormick feel nervous. There, Cormick tries to reassure them, saying he'll send his team to solve the issue and find the missing coin box. He asks the high table for help, but KD refuses, blaming him for the loss. KD tells Cormick he has to pay for this mistake himself, since one of his own people stole it. She gives him 3 days to find the coin box and bring the thief to the high table. If he fails, Cormick will lose his position at the Continental. With that, the high table members leave, leaving Cormick frustrated and angry. Back at the Burton Karate Dojo, Winston and his team gather to discuss their next steps. Winston wants to find a team quickly and asks Miles if he knows any veterans who could be hired. Miles explains that most of his veteran friends have gone back to normal lives, but a lot of them still work for Cormick, so it's hard to find help. Miles remembers one of his father's friends, Gene, who used to be trusted by Cormick but now dislikes him. Shortly after, Lou offers to help gather more information on him. Lemmy mentions his contact, Maisie, who leads a group that rivals Cormick's. Maisie claims to be Cormick's enemy. Winston is surprised Maisie is still around. Lemmy explains that Maisie can't be taken down, and no one has ever seen her face. Maisie lives in the rundown area of Bowery. Lou warns Winston that they'll need a lot of money since Maisie is hard to work with. Moments later, a middle-aged man sits at a table, eating some bread while preparing his sniper rifle. This man, Gene, checks his target list and lines up his shot. His target is a man wearing glasses who is giving a gift to a child. Gene takes a shot, but the first one misses, and the target still doesn't notice Gene's presence. On his second attempt, Gene's target falls. The man he targeted is a known criminal wanted for assault, and Gene marks his paper to show that his job is done. When Gene returns home, Miles is waiting for him and is glad to see his weapons supplier. Miles brings a fixed rifle scope. Gene notes there's nothing wrong with it, suggesting Miles may have vision issues. Gene asks about Miles' sister and how she's doing after their father's passing, but Miles dodges the question, staying silent. Curious, Gene suspects that Miles is dealing with some trouble. There, Miles eventually admits he's involved with the Continental and that he's gathering a team for a difficult mission. And Gene, also having his own issues with Cormick, expresses interest in joining, but Miles is hesitant to involve him. Gene mentions he knows Cormick well and understands the ins and outs of the Continental Hotel. Miles manages to persuade him, and Gene, realizing he's been cleverly convinced, gets annoyed and chases after him. In the rundown Bowery area, surrounded by homeless people, Winston enters a building that serves food. He immediately asks the guard about Maisie, but the guard pretends not to know who she is. Winston sits down, standing out with his clean clothes, drawing attention from everyone around him. An old woman approaches, claiming to be the person he's looking for, but Winston doesn't believe she's the real Maisie. To draw her out, Winston bangs the table with a knife, causing everyone to point their weapons at him. Looking around, Winston spots a calm woman nearby, certain she's the real Maisie. Soon after, they sit on the rooftop. Previously, Maisie has heard rumors that Cormick is hunting people, and it's clear that Winston is one of them. Maisie comments that many people come looking for her and praises Winston for his bravery in meeting her. Winston explains his purpose, that he's heard that Maisie has a team that's free from Cormick's control. He quickly asks for a price to help him, but Maisie declines, saying she can't be bought. She only helps people who she genuinely sympathizes with, as she has all the money she needs and doesn't need Winston's. Then, Winston openly shares his goal of taking down Cormick, but Maisie doubts he can do it. Suddenly, one of Maisie's followers reports that Cormick's group has noticed Winston's arrival, but her people have handled the situation downstairs. This becomes the perfect moment for Winston to leave. Although he tries to ask her price again, Maisie firmly instructs him to go. One of Maisie's followers guides Winston out through a hidden route. As they walk, Winston notices the many operations happening in Maisie's underground business, showing that Maisie has a successful operation and doesn't need anything from him. At Charlie's warehouse, Max, Charlie's helicopter pilot friend, packs up valuable belongings with his child. Max is frustrated because Charlie's disappearance has put them in danger, and he still owes Max money. Suddenly, a group of cars pulls up, bringing the twin assassins and Cormick's men to the warehouse. They search for the coin-printing machine, tearing apart the place and even going through Charlie's car, but they find nothing. Disappointed, they leave. Meanwhile, Yin goes to the theater where she once stayed with Frankie. She looks at a photo of herself and Frankie, remembering the happy times they shared, and tears up. Suddenly, she hears someone entering the place. Yin goes to check and finds 3 people there. They notice a mannequin nearby and hit it. The projector screen suddenly lights up, causing them to scatter and look around. Yin uses this moment to attack, taking down all 3 with no mercy. In a church, Cormick prays under the pressure from the high table, who gave him only 3 days to solve the problem without rest. All the high-ranking professionals he hired stand behind him. Cormick dismisses them, warning that they're all doomed if they don't find his coin-printing machine soon. He then tells Sharon, who's still there, to head back and take care of the hotel. Moments later, Winston arrives at Charlie's warehouse and is suddenly attacked by Max, who thinks Winston works for Cormick. Max explains that Cormick's men already ransacked the place and that Charlie has disappeared. Max plans to leave the city for a while and is taking Charlie's belongings because Charlie owes him. Before leaving, Winston offers Max the chance to join a team to fight Cormick. Max stops, thinking about the offer. Meanwhile, Lemmy talks to Lou, who's practicing her axe throwing. Lou is still unsure about Miles's plan to help Winston take down Cormick. She asks Lemmy why he's willing to join, especially since he wasn't that close to Frankie. Lemmy says he's doing it for Miles, who took him in after the war when no one else would. Shortly after, everyone gathers in the basement of Burden Karate. Winston discusses his plan and the progress of recruiting the team, mentioning that he couldn't get Maisie to join. Yin is also there and brings a blueprint of the Continental building, drawn by Frankie. Gene compares the blueprint to his own memory, confirming that all the rooms are there and noting how Cormick designed the place to protect himself. There's even an armory in the building, providing full weapons and defenses. They realize they'll need a well-thought-out plan. The next day, Mayhew is happily spending time with his kids and wife when Silva knocks on the door, asking for help. They talk outside, where Silva says she needs assistance in locating a green VW that's often seen in Chinatown. At first, Mayhew refuses and tells Silva to stop investigating Frankie. But when Silva threatens to speak to his wife, Mayhew reluctantly agrees. That night, Miles takes Yin out because he needs her help. They're already in the car, and it turns out Miles speaks Vietnamese fluently. He's on his way to meet an old friend who supplies gear from a military warehouse. There, Miles asks Yin to drive the VW home afterward. On the way, Miles shares a story of fighting in the Vietnam War alongside Frankie. He recalls how they got stuck in the jungle, with their team down to just a few members, no food left, and unable to escape as the enemy closed in. They had nothing to do but pray, and strangely, they made it home alive. However, after the war ended, they were forgotten. Yin, moved by the story, tears up, thinking of Frankie. Suddenly, Miles gets a signal from his friend. He jumps out of the car, hops over a fence, and heads to get the vehicle his friend left for him. As he tries to leave, he accidentally enters the wrong code to open the gate. This mistake draws the attention of a guard, who approaches and starts questioning Miles, leaving him unsure how to explain his presence. Meanwhile, Sharon is chatting with Thomas, a young musician who often plays at the hotel. They're good friends. Thomas asks if Sharon ever thinks about leaving the Continental, especially since they both know the hotel's dark side. Thomas shares his plans to go back to college and suggests that maybe Sharon should consider continuing his education too. But Sharon declines, saying the Continental is the best place for him right now. In his hometown, crime was something to manage, but here at the hotel, it's controlled. Across the street, Gene and Winston are observing the hotel. Gene points out a part of the building that could be a good entry point to attack. Winston uses binoculars to look, while Gene explains how difficult it is to break into the hotel. Gene will be watching from his position while the rest of the team goes inside. Winston needs to be careful if Cormick activates the hotel's emergency alarm, because a red alarm gives everyone permission to go after each other. They realize they must prevent Cormick from pushing that button. Moments later, Winston spots Sharon talking with a musician. There, Gene explains that there are two types of people at the hotel, the bad ones and the brainwashed ones. At that time, Winston wants to use Sharon as part of the plan, but Gene warns that Sharon has been trained by Cormick, making it a challenge. However, Winston believes he can influence Sharon. In the morning, Sharon goes to the post office to pick up a letter from his father. On the way, he stops by his friend David's record store and requests a song. As he reads his father's letter, Sharon tells David he's lucky to have a record shop here, since back in Karen's hometown, it would be destroyed by locals. Soon after, David invites Sharon to come with him, saying he has something to show him, and Lou is already there. David takes Karen's letter from the envelope, walks outside, and hands it to Winston. Meanwhile, Lou spots a kid hired by someone to break her dojo's window. She chases him down to the front of a store, catching up with him. But a man outside the shop tells the boy to go inside. Lou wants him to pay for the broken window, but Danley signals his men to attack Lou. Then, Lou steps out of her car, unfazed and dangerous. At that time, she manages to take down all three of Dan Lee's men, firing her weapon and challenging him to stop messing with her dojo. There, Danley hints that he's been letting Burton Karate Dojo off too easily, but Lou ignores him and decides to get even. She leaves determined. Back at the dojo, Lou throws out Dan Lee's cigarette machine. Soon after, Gene arrives at the dojo and heads down to meet Winston, who's reading Karen's letter. Winston tells him they've found an opportunity. Meanwhile, Sharon gets on a bus to head back to the hotel, and Lou also boards, handing the driver a wad of cash. The driver announces that the bus is out of service for the day and asks everyone to get off. Shortly after, Sharon tries to get off the bus, but he's told to sit back down. Winston enters from the back door, and the bus drives toward a quiet area. Sharon thinks Winston might want revenge, but instead, Winston begins talking about his past with his older brother, Frankie, under Cormick's control. Back then, Frankie worked as a debt collector for Cormick. Frankie once tried to keep a little money for himself, but was caught. Their car and home were blown up, and they were dragged down the street over broken glass. That's when they learned how cruel Cormick could be. After that, Winston starts to influence Sharon, offering him a way out of Cormick's control. He promises that working with him will be fair and that they will help Sharon. Right now, Sharon is controlled by Cormick and has no real freedom. Winston also doubts Cormick's promise to bring Karen's father to the Continental, saying that Cormick will never follow through. Finally, Sharon is let off the bus, but when he checks his envelope, he realizes the letter inside is gone. On the other hand, Cormick, still frustrated, is searching for his missing coin printing machine. He calls Thomas in for a talk, knowing Thomas plans to leave the Continental to study in Europe. Cormick praises Thomas, saying that not many from their background aim for higher education. However, Cormick becomes angry when he finds out Thomas tried to encourage Sharon to go to college too, feeling his work to groom Sharon for hotel management was wasted. Cormick then asks Thomas to play a song about loyalty. Proudly, Thomas plays the music, but suddenly, Cormick strikes him, releasing his anger. Tragically, Thomas dies from the blow. Soon after, Sharon returns to the Continental Hotel and enters Cormick's private room, heavily guarded. He sees Thomas's body and is deeply confused. Cormick tells him that Thomas stole something from him and that he's tired of people stealing from him. Now, Cormick wants a new musician and suggests Karen's father as a replacement. Although Sharon feels conflicted, he tells Cormick that Winston is building a team to go after him. Sharon mentions that Winston recently approached him to join, but that he refused, which earns him Cormick's praise. Sharon then asks permission to learn what Thomas tried to steal, and Cormick answers, giving Sharon encouragement and approval. In 1955 in New York City, young Frankie and Winston were told by their mother to sleep in the trunk of their car. Their mother assured them it was only temporary and said goodbye before going to work. She gave Frankie a gun for protection and told him to go back to sleep. And Winston, coming out of his memories, looks at the car trunk and finds something inside. Meanwhile, Yin and Miles are practicing, moving quietly and planning to take out the person in front of them. However, it's just a simulation to prepare for Winston's entry into the Continental Hotel. Winston hopes everyone takes the simulation seriously so they can successfully reach the weapon storage, where Winston will bring the key. Jean points out that the key is likely with Cormick, who is known to be paranoid. If Cormick opens the armory first and gives weapons to the hotel guests, they'll be in trouble. But if Winston gets there first, they'll need Maisie's crew for backup. After that, Winston tells the group that he has an agreement with Maisie and is ready for her help. Miles feels confident about their abilities, but has doubts about Winston. Winston's new friends also aren't sure if Maisie will actually join. Miles says he can't trust things that aren't certain, leading to an argument between him and Winston. Winston, feeling offended, warns that if anyone wants to back out, now is the time. However, he stays determined to go after Cormick and take over the hotel, with or without their support, then leaves. Meanwhile, Lemmy and Lou are outside, moving weapons around, and Mayhew is secretly taking photos of their activity. Lou and Lemmy set up CE4 explosives at a location. Lou double-checks with Lemmy, asking if they're really going through with it. Lemmy replies that they have no choice and are just following Miles's orders. Suddenly, Silva arrives at the shop and asks about Winston. Lou and Lemmy pretend not to know him. Silva quickly reveals she knows their identities and their activities in the building. She insists that her only goal is finding Winston. Silva leaves her business card, asking them to contact her if they find him. All of this, including Silva's presence, is secretly photographed by Mayhew. Jean, on the other hand, goes to an apartment near the Continental Hotel, pretending to be a pest control worker. The apartment owner is suspicious since management hadn't informed her about pest control. Jean distracts her by pretending to find a dead rat he'd planted earlier, causing her to get frightened. He then suggests she stay in a hotel provided by his company while he cleans up the place. Jean flatters and charms her, making her comfortable enough to leave the apartment so he can take care of the issue. The next day, Miles tests his bullets on bulletproof glass, looking for sharper bullets for Jean to use. Soon after, he talks with Lou, asking her to go to Jersey to pick up these special bullets. Suddenly, Lou questions Miles, asking how their dad knew about Jean living at the Continental. She reminds him that their dad had some trouble with the Chinatown boss in the past. Lou wants to know what really happened and what their father's true work involved. There, Miles tries to calm his sister, asking her to help by going to Jersey to get the bullets. Moments later, the twins, along with Sharon, track down the bus driver Winston bribed. At first, the driver refuses to talk, but the twins show their weapons. Finally, he tells them that the people got off at the Rhodes Hotel. Despite this, the twins still eliminate the driver. That day, Winston feels a bit nervous because he's about to meet with Maisie. Luckily, she agrees to come. Maisie says she only has 5 minutes to talk. They walk to an empty building that used to be a bank. On the other hand, Winston, known as a good storyteller, shares a story about his mother. He explains how she raised him and his brother, working day and night just to make $16 a week. They were deep in debt, and their home was at risk of being taken away. One day, his mother took him and his brother to the bank, knelt before the bank manager, and begged for a loan. The bank manager got angry and told them to leave. His mother explained that she was the one who cleaned the bank's floors. In the end, she was able to get the loan. At that time, Winston emphasizes that poor people are often looked down upon, but they can surprise everyone. As a gift, Winston gives Maisie the ownership certificate for the old bank building, saying it would be a perfect spot for her and her team. Maisie starts to show interest. Winston then asks if her team could work for him for one day, wearing suits he's already prepared. Hearing that, Maisie agrees. Meanwhile, Lou notices someone following her as she heads to Jersey. She quickly finds a payphone and leaves a message for Winston with the Rhodes Hotel receptionist, warning him to be careful if anyone's trailing him. Suddenly, Mayhew appears, wanting to ask her something. Lou instantly attacks, knocking him out before checking his ID, only to realize Mayhew is actually a police officer. Later, Winston arrives at the Rhodes Hotel, where the receptionist gives him Lou's message. Back in his room, Lou arrives and tells Winston that she's been curious about 2 police officers, a man and a woman, who have been looking for him over the past few days. Winston is confused as to why they're after him. The next day, Sharon reports to Cormick that they've located Winston. Cormick is pleased and tells Sharon to prepare some drugs he usually takes. Cormick, a mix of religious and ruthless, uses these drugs to fuel his hallucinations. Angry with the high table, Cormick vows he won't let them take his empire, his home, or his hotel. Determined to protect his place, Cormick slams his fist on the table, lost in his thoughts. The following day, Mayhew meets Silva in a car, looking bruised and beaten. Silva is surprised at his state, and Mayhew explains that he was attacked by the woman who owns the dojo in Chinatown while he was following Lou to Jersey. He tells Silva that Lou plans to meet Winston at the Rhodes Hotel. And Silva, obsessed with Frankie's case, believes it's connected to her past and searches for clues in her apartment. Frustrated, she checks the place while Mayhew tries to calm her down, but she angrily hits him and tells him to get out of the car. Moments later, Hansel and Cormick's men arrive at the Rhodes Hotel and ask for Winston's room. The receptionist refuses at first, but they threaten with a gun. Meanwhile, Winston and Lou are talking in the room when the door is forced open. Winston hides and fights back, managing to escape the room. However, Hansel overpowers Lou. As Winston hurries out of the hotel, Silva arrives, sees him, and calls his name while pointing a gun. Suddenly, Cormick's men appear and shoot at Winston. Silva gets into a shootout with Cormick's men, where they are killed, but Silva is also injured. Winston tries to check on Silva, but Hansel catches him, knocks him out, and takes him away in a car. At that time, Lou arrives downstairs too late, and Mayhew comes to the hotel to check on Silva, who has a bullet graze on her cheek. Silva tells him she almost caught Winston, but Continental people took him. She finds a Continental coin in Cormick's man's pocket and keeps it. Mayhew warns Silva not to go too far, but Silva hands him her badge, saying there's no turning back for her, and leaves. Back at the hideout, Lou tells everyone that Winston's team is ready to start their attack. Miles is confident the plan will work. Lou then explains that the twins have captured Winston, while Silva heads to the Continental Hotel, shows a special gold coin, and gets a room, number 818. Soon after, Winston is taken to Cormick's private room, and Cormick is thrilled to have finally caught him. There, Winston recognizes Cormick as the man who spent years building his empire by burning down buildings. Cormick demands to know where his coin-printing machine is, but Winston won't answer and sarcastically tells him to ask Frankie's ghost. Angry, Cormick orders his men to throw Winston off the top balcony. As they drag Winston out, gunfire suddenly breaks out, and two of Cormick's men are hit. Cormick hides and tries to grab his shotgun from under the desk, but it's missing. He turns to see Sharon holding the shotgun and pointing it at him. Feeling betrayed, Cormick can't believe Sharon turned against him. Sharon asks for the key to the armory, and Cormick, pretending to be helpful, tells Sharon to get it himself. Suddenly, Winston shouts for Sharon to shoot, but Sharon hesitates because Winston's hands are still tied. Cormick seizes the chance, escapes the room, and locks the door from the outside, vowing to get revenge. Meanwhile, the whole team prepares to take over the Continental Hotel. Miles and Yin enter from below, while Lemmy slides across a cable from a nearby building, cutting it to get inside. Ben is also part of the team and plans to enter through the basement. The receptionist on duty notices something strange with bodies disappearing. She pulls out her weapon and checks around. Yin immediately attacks her, threatening her and demanding to know where the twins are. Yin is only focused on getting revenge. When the woman refuses to answer, Miles takes her down and reminds Yin to stick to the plan. Lemmy begins blowing open doors, and as guards come out, he takes them down. Winston tells the team that Cormick is heading to the armory with the key. He orders them to move to Phase 2 and meet at the armory, while he and Sharon make their way there. Back at the dojo, Lou is still there, unsure if she'll join her brother. Suddenly, a young boy working for Dan Lee arrives, and Lou scolds him. The boy tells her that Dan Lee, his boss, is coming with many people. Shortly after, Lou goes outside to meet Dan Lee, who shows up with a group of men. Lou warns that if they try anything, her brother will fight them off. But Dan Lee feels confident since he knows that Miles and his team are away on a mission. He declares that the dojo will be shut down. Then, Dan Lee reveals to Lou that her father took over this place by killing the original owner and made a deal with Chun, the area's boss, who allowed her father to keep the dojo in exchange for loyalty. But now, with new leadership and her father gone, that deal no longer matters. Danley shows a gun engraved with her father's name, a well-known assassin. Lou's brother knew about this, but couldn't bring himself to tell her. Danley sends the young boy back to their base, but the boy says he wants to stay with Lou. Lou hugs him, shocked by the truth, and then steps aside as Danley and his men begin to destroy the dojo. Meanwhile, Cormick heads to the basement and tries to open a locked door. Unable to open it, he breaks through the wall to get inside. Knowing there's a CCTV camera in the room, he signals his team through it and then leaves. Winston, meanwhile, is treated by Sharon, who helps his wounds heal. Sharon apologizes for not being able to shoot Cormick when he had the chance. Cormick manages to activate an emergency alarm called Inimicus. This alarm triggers all the assassins in the Continental Hotel to arm themselves and leave their rooms, including the highly trained staff. Yin, already inside, hides in the air vents. Lemmy and Miles stay alert and look for safe hiding spots. Winston contacts his entire team, telling them the red light is on and to stay cautious. He and Sharon then move quickly. Through the loudspeakers, an announcement orders all assassins to hunt down Winston, Sharon, and their friends. All hotel guests are asked to join in, and Silva, who happens to be there, also hears it. Pipes throughout the hotel release wanted posters of Winston and Sharon, marking them as targets. On the other hand, the twins, still in their room, start preparing to move. Winston informs his team via radio that they'll gather near the armory. All hotel guests begin searching for the targets, with every hotel staff member involved. Soon after, Silva leaves her room, grabbing a wanted poster from two people. They recognize her as a police officer, but Silva fights them off and takes them down. Meanwhile, down below, Lemmy is chased by guards but manages to take them all down. His wanted posters are already out. He reaches the hotel administration room, where a female worker begs him not to hurt her. Letting his guard down, Lemmy promises he won't, but suddenly, she attacks him with a machete. Lemmy fights back with his axe. After a tough struggle, Lemmy finally defeats her. On the other hand, Winston and Sharon arrive at the armory door, finding no one else there yet. Winston radios his team, checking on everyone's location. Miles is busy fighting off attackers, including a surprise ambush by a ninja. Jean, positioned as a sniper, takes out this attacker and many more. Yin is crawling through the air vents, searching for the twins, while Ben is already in the CCTV room, trying to gain control of the cameras. Back with Winston and Sharon, they knock on the armory door, checking if Cormick is inside. Suddenly, dozens of Cormick soldiers appear, pointing their guns. Cormick shows up, mocking Sharon for betraying him over a violinist. Sharon calls Cormick cruel and says he will face consequences. Cormick gets angry, ordering his men to get rid of Sharon. At that time, Winston stays calm, and then, unexpectedly, some of the guards turn their guns on Cormick, and they're actually Maisie's undercover team members. Now, Cormick and his men are outnumbered. Winston declares that he isn't the only one with backup. More of Maisie's team, hidden in nearby rooms, come out as Winston orders them to open the armory. Realizing he's been betrayed, Cormick, under threat, opens the armory door but quickly destroys the lock and shuts off the lights. A chaotic shootout begins in the darkness. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Lou is stunned by what she's learned about her father's past. Sitting outside with a young boy named Fong, she notices he's holding a remote he stole from Lou's shop. Lou smiles, asking if Fong wants to see how it works. Suddenly, they hear the beep of a C4 bomb planted in the shop. Realizing the danger, they watch as the shop explodes, leaving everything buried in rubble. Back at the hotel, the lights turn back on. Sharon sees everyone lying on the floor, all dead. He calls out for Winston, who turns out to be safe, hiding behind someone's body. Winston quickly speaks into his radio, informing his team. Since they failed to get into the armory, they'll move to the next phase, which is taking down all enemies. Moments later, Cormick gets into the elevator, heading to a secret floor. The elevator guard asks for his permission slip to go to that floor, which annoys Cormick. Then he punches the guard and throws him out. Shortly after, Sharon and Winston reach the elevator. At that time, Sharon helps the injured guard, while Winston opens the elevator door, only to see that the elevator car is gone. Then, Sharon talks to the guard, who informs him that Cormick is heading to the 13th floor. Suddenly, Silva arrives and points her gun at Winston. She tells Sharon to leave, saying this is her business with Winston, and drags him away. In an apartment nearby, Gene is focused on his sniper aim when the apartment owner walks in. Gene points his gun at her, but she says she only came to get her medicine. Not wanting to hurt her, Gene ties her to a chair and asks her to sit as comfortably as possible, apologizing for the inconvenience. After that, Silva takes Winston to her room, and he starts asking what she really wants. Silva reveals she was a child who survived a store fire back in 1955. Her investigation showed that Winston's older brother was responsible for the fire that killed her family, and Winston was there too. Silva explains she only wants revenge for the pain of losing her family. At that moment, Winston begs for a chance to explain, saying they were just kids who followed orders and were told no one was inside. But Silva doesn't care. She pours gasoline on Winston and lights a match, ready to set him on fire. And Winston, full of regret, admits he threw the firebomb into the store. Suddenly, Gene shoots to stop the situation. Winston tells Gene to help Silva, offering her medicine from Sharon to calm her down. Gene promises to return and asks Silva to stay put. Shortly after, Winston leaves the room and sees a huge man outside, taking down everyone in his path. Even after being shot, the man won't go down. Sharon arrives to help, hitting the man with a big gas tank, and pulls Winston to hide in another room. Meanwhile, Cormick has reached the 13th floor, the control center for the entire Continental Hotel. Cormick grabs a microphone and announces a $2 million reward for anyone who brings him Winston's head, plus $1 million for each of Winston's allies. On the other hand, Orson, the hotel operator, complains that they still haven't found the coin-printing machine, but Cormick, in his anger, doesn't care anymore. Winston then asks Sharon where Cormick is broadcasting from, and Sharon guesses it's the 13th floor, even though that floor isn't listed in the hotel records. Winston notices a beautiful painting in Karen's room, and it's a gift from his brother, Frankie. Then, Sharon shares that Frankie was the only one at the Continental who spoke to him personally, and had even prepared an escape plan. Behind the painting, there's cash and a complete set of weapons. And Winston, feeling more determined than ever, promises Sharon that he will make sure Sharon sees his father again once they defeat Cormick. Outside, Miles takes down more of the assassins at the Continental, while the twins defeat many of Maisie's crew. Yin, watching from the air vents, tracks the twins, then drops down to take out more enemies below. Moments later, Silva, wounded with a gunshot to her stomach, decides to use the medicine Winston left behind. The twins continue to clear Maisie's men until Yin sneaks up behind them with a gun. She has a bomb strapped to her and is ready to end it all. When Miles arrives and sees what Yin is about to do, he tries to stop her, reminding her that their mission is about building a future, not destruction. He tells her Frankie wouldn't want this. Taking advantage of their distraction, the twins open fire on both Miles and Yin. Miles quickly contacts Lemmy for backup. Fortunately, Lemmy, who's in the pipe room, is awake and nearby. After learning Miles's location, Lemmy sends a bomb through the pneumatic pipe system to the bar, causing a massive explosion. Outside, Ben watches everything from a garbage truck. Lou knocks on the door, handing him a pistol and her mischievous companion, phone, to keep an eye on. Lou then heads inside. At the bar, now destroyed, Miles crawls out of his hiding spot, finding Hansel still alive. And Lemmy, trying to help Miles, gets badly injured by the explosion. Before he dies, Lemmy leaves a message for Winston, saying he's already set up the C4 bombs. Winston closes his eyes in respect for Lemmy. Shortly after, Winston contacts Ben, asking him to monitor the location of Cormick's men and any assassins gathered in the hotel. Winston starts sending bombs through different rooms as a fast way to eliminate the enemies. Seeing this, Cormick is furious as his guest assassins are wiped out, and he begins searching for a way to reach the 13th floor control room. Sharon remembers that, when he first worked at the hotel, he used a food elevator from the kitchen that went to the secret floor. Together, they head to the kitchen. After getting to the upper floors using an access card, Yin encounters Gretel outside, near a pool. Yin immediately throws Gretel's remote into the water. Gretel drops her weapon, and the two engage in a fierce fight. Yin, filled with anger, manages to break Gretel's leg, but Gretel is flexible and fights back hard. Finally, Yin pushes Gretel into the pool, ending the battle with determination and rage. Everything goes quiet as Gretel tries to get out of the pool, confused as she realizes a bomb vest is strapped to her and about to explode. Yin has her revenge, leaving Cormick furious after losing his trusted fighter. Upset and confused, Cormick wonders how things went so wrong. He had requested help from the high table, but they ignored him. Angry, Cormick orders the operator to start the Definition protocol, but the operator refuses, leading Cormick to eliminate him. Just then the phone rings. It was KD asks Cormick if he's found the coin printing machine and reminds him not to harm the operator, Orson. After that, Cormick quickly hangs up and uses Orson's hand to activate the protocol. Moments later, Miles and Lou finish their fight and are shocked as steel barriers close off every door and window. A liquid transfer begins, signaling the start of the Continental Hotel's forced destruction protocol. In 10 minutes, the entire hotel will explode and collapse. Cormick leaves using an elevator while Silva watches him descend in a secret lift. Meanwhile, Winston and Sharon reach the 13th floor, finding the operator dead. Sharon looks at the monitor screens, realizing the hotel's destruction sequence has started. On the other hand, Yin, now trapped outside, can't get back in. Cormick reaches the lower floors and heads to an emergency exit connected to the subway. Sharon explains to Winston that the countdown has started, and the hotel, along with everyone in it, will be destroyed. The only way to stop it is with Cormick's handprint, shown on the screen to be already at the exit below. Soon after, Winston quickly comes up with a plan and jumps down a garbage chute, landing safely at the bottom. He readies his weapon, but Cormick suddenly attacks him from behind, furious that Winston has ruined his plans. They start fighting, and Cormick yells about how he once made Winston's brother burn down buildings and now wants Winston to suffer the same way. Moments later, Silva arrives and points her gun at Cormick after hearing his confession about causing her family's death. Cormick thinks she's just another assassin from the hotel and tells her to drop her gun, saying the reward is off. But Silva fires and Cormick falls. With less than 3 minutes until the hotel explodes, Cormick's emergency escape train appears, showing he had planned a way out. Winston acts fast, grabbing Cormick's hand to stop the hotel's self-destruct countdown. The Continental Hotel is saved, and Winston and his friends successfully take over. They all hug, relieved and happy. Ben is thrilled, and Yin is surprised as the steel doors unlock, the red warning lights turn off, and the hotel's no-killing rule is restored. On the other hand, Gene, after finishing his mission, unties the apartment owner and apologizes for his actions. Surprisingly, the woman isn't angry. In fact, she admits that she's grown tired of the Continental Hotel, having lived there for 27 years. She invites Gene to visit the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, giving him a new friend to spend time with. Meanwhile, Winston and Sharon wait for the whole team in the hotel's main room. They chat about the possibility of Winston returning home to be with his father. But Sharon refuses, saying the hotel is his home now, and Winston wouldn't have survived without him here. Just then, the adjudicator from the high table, KD, and her assistant, Henchman, arrive and make their way to the hotel. At that time, everyone gathers except for Lemmy, who didn't survive. There, Winston offers his team an expensive beer to thank them for their hard work when he hears something outside. Outside, Winston sees Henchman placing a plaque on the wall. KD steps out of a car and announces that the hotel is now in interregnum, meaning all activity must stop until the high table gives further instructions. KD congratulates Winston on taking the hotel back from Cormick. Winston talks about his belief in fate, saying he's had both good and bad luck. He also mentions that his brother Frankie had hidden the coin-printing machine in their mom's old car, which Winston finally found. KD compliments Winston on his actions, but firmly reminds him that the hotel isn't his. Winston stands his ground, saying he defeated Cormick in his own home and now has full control of what the high table needs. He assures KD that the coin-printing machine is in a very safe place which in Maisie's hands, stored securely in the bank building Winston bought for her. Winston adds that in business, he never uses middlemen. And KD, frustrated, warns that the high table doesn't recognize him and will not negotiate. As KD walks away, Winston calmly descends the stairs, draws his gun, and eliminates KD. Henchman understands Winston now has the upper hand and carries away KD's body. And so, Winston becomes the new ruler of the Continental Hotel. The high table allows him to keep his position, knowing he controls the coin printing machine. The series ends. The moral lesson from this series is remember, if you're hiding in a hotel full of assassins, just act casual or maybe wear a really convincing disguise. Also, never trust anyone who smiles at you while holding a bazooka, cause they're probably not friendly.